Let's go meet some alpacas. Hey folks, it's Mary, aka MercyTriumphs, and this is Slow Crochet. Today I want to bring you with me and maybe my children and some other families and go on a little excursion to an alpaca farm outside of Nashville, Tennessee. Now, believe it or not, there are quite a few alpaca farms in the state of Tennessee. There's a whole association of them, but this particular one is one that one of my fellow homeschool parents met the owners and realized that they do little field trips out to their farm. Earlier in the spring, I was at the Middle Tennessee Fiber Festival, and I did meet several farmers who grow alpacas, who raise them, and then take their fleeces and spin them into beautiful yarns, and they might even have mills on the property. Originally, this particular farm was such a place, but in the more recent years, they chose to stop spinning their fleeces and instead provide them to other suppliers. However, they did still stock some beautiful alpaca fibers, some gorgeous yarns, and some beautiful hand-knit, predominantly hand-knit, but also woven pieces. So today, I want to bring you along with me, show you some of these beautiful, adorable animals, and share with you some of the information that I learned about alpacas themselves and how they're raised. And then I will also have a section where I'm talking about all of the yarny goodness. And yes, I did come home with a little bit of yarn, and I'll go into more detail on that later on in the video. So I'm going to start today by just talking about some of the things that I learned and kind of the experience that we had at the field trip. And I'll also be dropping in some footage and some photos at the same time. When we arrived at Long Hollow Suri Alpacas, we were greeted by the owner as well as the veterinarian, and they were super friendly. They're used to doing field trips with children with all ages, and it just so happened that there were not just parents there, but a couple of grandparents in our group as well. So there was a lot of questions and answers about all different sorts and all different aspects of the business of raising alpacas. Now, although this farm no longer mills its own fiber, there were plenty of other reasons that they keep alpacas, and you could see when you looked in just how invested this family is in raising their animals and the pride they take in having healthy, award-winning livestock. As we learned, alpacas have an average lifespan of about 15 years, but the alpacas on this farm live from about 18 to 23 years. One thing that was really important and emphasized was that alpacas are herd animals. They do not do well alone, and also you don't want just a male and a female, you want a herd of all of the same sex. So in this case, they started with 4 females, and then later on they grew their herd until now they have, I think, about 80 alpacas. But on this farm, they're very well protected and they're used to meeting new people. We were instructed that alpacas like to get to know you by sniffing the top of your head. So as we entered the barn, some of the alpacas were encouraged to come and greet us. Now, typically they live outside. It's only under extreme weather circumstances that they would actually come into the barns. So because the day was kind of drizzly, we only met one part of the herd. We met the ladies and some of the babies, but the males are kept in a different part of the farm, and so we did not cross through the squishy rain to get to see them. But these ladies were so sweet and very gentle and very curious. So we all kind of approached, the children especially, approached the fence, and they put their heads down, and sure enough, slowly but surely, one alpaca and then another came forward to start sniffing heads and investigate. One of the things that I found so beautiful about these animals is that they encourage gentleness. They spook so easily. And so despite their size, despite that they're quite a bit taller than all of these children, they really are such gentle creatures and so beautiful to watch. Their movement reminded me a little bit of a flock of birds, and that was actually something that the owner said drew him and his wife to alpacas. They are so beautiful and fascinating to watch. These particular animals had just been sheared, and we did learn that alpacas are sheared about once a year, really no more than that. So it's always in the spring, and that just happened to be when we were visiting. So they do look a little bit thinner than maybe they might in their woollier seasons, but that was more than fine with us. In terms of cuddliness factor, well, we learned that alpacas are not very cuddly. They tend to be a little bit shy of people in general and a little bit more like cats perhaps than like dogs. Every alpaca has its own personality, and although there might be one or two that's the braver or the bolder or the leader of the herd, you really do have kind of a shyness to them. They don't really take to cuddling that easily. But also, similarly to cats, when they heard their food shaking, they all came to have a bite. So that made me laugh quite a bit. We were able to stroke their necks, and they are just as soft as you imagine alpaca fiber to be. But again, they're not really interested in belly rubs. They don't want to be handled that much. Alpacas are camelids, so they're related to camels and llamas and vicuñas rather than horses or sheep. But they do chew their cud, and they can be a little bit of picky eaters, we were told. They do have kind of soft feet, but they also have some claws on them. And where they are from originally, in the mountains of Peru and Chile, those toenails will wear down on the rocks. Those soft feet will be able to grip the rocks pretty easily. After spending a little bit of time with the adult ladies, we came to a different part of the barn, and there were a few little babies that came to greet us. So all the children bent down so that these sweet little babies could come and investigate them. They were really nervous, really skittish, and if you moved too quickly, they would all kind of bounce away really quickly. They didn't have very far to go, of course, but eventually they warmed up to us, and they came and sniffed the heads of some of the children, which hopefully will be a memory that they'll remember for a long time. Just as a little aside, this is Nashville, home of country music, and whether you realize it or not, you are surrounded by industry people. Sure enough, some of these alpacas have been in music videos. Not sure which ones. I don't really follow along with country music that much, but I thought, even here we have industry folk that have come and had alpacas in a country video. So if you know which one I'm talking about, if you've ever seen an alpaca in a country music video, please do let me know in the comments, because I have no idea, but I would love to see some of those animals from that same sweet farm. After visiting the alpacas, we returned to the shop, and the children were able to pick out some old issues of alpaca magazines, which have been really wonderful for us to look through. I do want to share with you some of the information from one of these magazines, and that is about alpaca fiber. So here are some of the reasons that alpaca fiber is more sustainable than maybe some other fibers that are available. Number one, because of the way their feet are shaped, they tread really lightly on the earth. So as they're walking through their environment, they're not disturbing the land and causing it to have to create new vegetation and making holes in the land. That allows the land to retain the moisture because it's retaining that plant life. They don't have upper teeth, so that allows the plants to stay intact. They're not being uprooted entirely. Grasses are not being uprooted, so they're just being cropped off so that they can then grow some more leaves and then provide more food and not have as great of a disturbance in the fields and in their environment. Alpaca fibers, of course, can come in different weights or different strengths or different finenesses, but it does felt, so every bit of those alpaca fibers can have a function. Even the fibers that are maybe not fine enough to be put into beautiful yarns or made into woven garments, they can be used as felt. They can be used industrially in forms of linings and in forms of insulation. Alpaca fiber is really super fine, and so that can generate an incredible amount of warmth. Alpacas do not have any lanolin in their fiber. And this is something that was pretty interesting for me to learn, is contrasting alpaca fiber with wool from sheep or goats, is there's no lanolin. Lanolin is that kind of sticky, kind of wool smell substance. It's almost like an ointment. I know that it can be used as a moisturizer, but it's the lanolin in wool that people tend to have an allergic reaction to rather than the fibers itself. So alpaca is naturally hypoallergenic because they do not produce any of that lanolin. Similarly to sheep's wool, alpaca fiber is a very good insulator, but unlike sheep's wool, it wicks moisture away. So you're not ever going to have a really super soggy, wet piece of alpaca the water is just not going to be retained in those fibers. So unlike wool, where it can get really wet, but it'll still insulate you, but it'll retain its moisture, alpaca fiber will not. It'll just run right off. But also similar to wool, it is fire resistant. So it is more of a luxury fiber because it has all of these wonderful natural properties. So much of the focus was on alpacas as animals and how they grow and how they do on farms and how you raise them, that it wasn't until I got home that I realized, oh no, I should have asked some pretty yarny questions. I did send out an email to the farmers, and hopefully Editing Mary will pop in here with some answers to those and a bit more information about how we go from the alpacas on the farm to the yarn that we had, or what they do with the fibers now that they're no longer processing their own fiber. But if I don't have that information, I will put some links in the description to some more information on how that process happens. Now, the yarn. I'll make this pretty short and sweet. It was really hard to choose, but I was going to choose something. I was gifted some funds for Mother's Day, and so I knew I wanted to spend a little bit just at this shop, just to have a bit of a memory here, and also to be able to share with you guys, to be honest. I wanted to show something that I came away with. So what did I get? I chose this beautiful little hank. This is 200 yards. This is 2 3/8 ounces, and it was called Strawberry Shortcake. I was so tempted by these gorgeous yellows, these gorgeous kind of blends of color, but this one in particular, I think it was because I had strawberries on the brain. It's strawberry season here in Tennessee, and I thought, what better way to kind of honor that and the season that we were going to this farm than with a hank of strawberry colored yarn. Now, this is really more strawberry cheesecake, not strawberries themselves, but still very pretty. They classified this as a 3-ply sport weight, and it calls for needles size 3 to 5. It looks to be about a sport weight. Yeah, I think a sport weight is a pretty accurate description on that. So 200 yards, not going to get me that far. This one was $17. So yes, expensive, but who can say that they picked up yarn on the farm where the animals were grown and reared and sheared and spun and dyed. So glad to have that. Now, 200 yards of a sport weight is not going to get me very far, so I did go into my stash and I found that I had a cake of this from Isager Alpaca Merino blend made in Italy. And so this one is the color slate blue, and this is a 50% alpaca, 50% wool blend. And so I thought these two together would be really beautiful. And again, we're still kind of going into some of the colors that I have back here, and also, you know, the pinks of sunset, but also just more of a springy, bright color. So I have an idea of what I want to make with these, and hopefully I will be able to get to that soon. Now, we were not the only family on the field trip, and there was another adult there that I saw really considering some of the yarns and some of the products. And this is someone I've known for a little bit, and she knows I crochet. And so I said, hey, if you want to pick up any yarn, I'd be happy to make something for you with it. So she took me up on that. And so she chose these 3. Now, aren't those gorgeous? These were unlabeled, and I was not there when Mr. Carl was weighing them out and pricing them out, but they are a little bit thicker. They're more of a DK weight, and they're a black kind of mixed in with a green, mixed in with a kind of a sky light blue. So really, really beautiful hanks there. I also have a pretty good idea of what to make with these. I was requested to make a scarf, and I think I have a pattern picked out for these as well. So for me, it's a joy that I get to work with them, and I'm excited to see it all play out. It is probably going to be a simple pattern because I don't want to overwhelm that yarn with a lot of frilliness or lace work. I really want the yarn to be what speaks. I want the impact to be on the colors, not the stitches per se. So excited to work with these. Maybe when I'm done, I'm going to hang 1 or 2 of these up so I can get started on that. One small quick note on the idea of caking up some yarn. There was a yarn ball winder on display, a beautiful wooden one. And when Mr. Carl asked the children who knew what that was, my children were quickly able to say, that's a yarn ball winder, Mom has one. So point of pride there. Thank y'all so much for coming along with me. I hope that you've had fun. I hope you get a better sense for why alpaca is as wonderful as it is. And maybe at some point you'll be able to try some. I know currently at Joann's they have an Eddie Bauer yarn that's a DK weight, and it's a blend of merino and alpaca yarn. And I know in some of the bigger box stores, in the larger yarn brands, you'll just have a little bit of alpaca. You won't necessarily have 100%, but when you do see it at a good price, I would encourage you to try it. It is such a wonderful fiber. It is super soft, and hopefully you'll be able to think of these really beautiful, long-lashed little animals and the way that they move so peacefully and so gently through your environment. And maybe when you get that yarn and you create something with it, you'll get a sense of that peace too, even wearing that sweet little creature's fiber and knowing that you're staying toasty warm while somewhere that little guy is being well cared for and loved. So that's all the alpaca goodness. Thank you to everyone who has been along with me today. Thank you for all of my YouTube friends, my subscribers, likers, commenters, all y'all who have been so encouraging. I really do enjoy just having a bit of fun on this channel and bringing yarn and yarn adjacent kind of topics and ideas to you. So thanks so much for that. And if I'm not your cup of tea, thank you so much for listening this long. I do appreciate you. I hope you know that. And I do hope I'll see you again soon. Bye.